Kiki's aunt, Sister Agnes. From the beginning, Sister Agnes disapproved of James. She believed Kiki deserved a life of luxury, not one of struggle with a man who had little to offer financially. Sister Agnes's disapproval was a constant shadow over their relationship. As time passed, the pressure from Kiki's family grew. Sister Agnes, in particular, was relentless in her efforts to persuade Kiki to marry a wealthy suitor. James looked deeply into Kiki's eyes, his voice filled with a mixture of love and desperation. "Promise you will never leave me?" he asked, holding her hands tightly. James had always been a lover boy. From the day he met Kiki, he knew she was the one. Kiki, on the other hand, was the object of desire for many men in their community. Wealthy and poor alike, they all sought her hand in marriage. But despite the attention and offers from wealthy suitors, Kiki remained steadfast in her love for James. She cherished the promise she had made to him. Both James and Kiki came from humble backgrounds. Life was not easy, but James worked tirelessly to provide for Kiki. He did all he could to make her happy, despite the allure of a more comfortable life with the wealthy men who pursued her. Kiki's heart belonged to James, and she was determined to keep her promise. However, there was one obstacle that seemed insurmountable: Kiki's aunt, Sister Agnes. From the beginning, Sister Agnes disapproved of James. She believed Kiki deserved a life of luxury, not one of struggle with a man who had little to offer financially. Sister Agnes's disapproval was a constant shadow over their relationship. As time passed, the pressure from Kiki's family grew. Sister Agnes, in particular, was relentless in her efforts to persuade Kiki to marry a wealthy suitor. Despite Kiki's protests and her unwavering love for James, her family's influence was strong. Eventually, the pressure became unbearable. One fateful day, Kiki was forced into a marriage with a wealthy man chosen by her family. James was devastated. The pain of losing Kiki to another man was more than he could bear. He had given his all to make her happy, and now she was gone, taken from him by the very people who should have supported their love. James's heart ached as he watched Kiki walk down the aisle with another man. He felt a deep sense of betrayal and loss. The love of his life was now married to someone else, and there was nothing he could do to change it. Meanwhile, Kiki's life took a dark turn. Despite the wealth and comfort her new marriage brought, she was never happy. Her husband was abusive, and Kiki found herself trapped in a cycle of domestic violence. She regretted every moment of her life, wishing she had been strong enough to stand up to her family. The promise she had made to James haunted her every day. Kiki's life was a series of regrets and heartaches. She missed James terribly and longed for the simple, genuine love they had shared. Her heart was heavy with sorrow as she endured the pain of her unhappy marriage. Years passed, and James eventually moved on. Though the pain of losing Kiki never fully disappeared, he found love again and built a happy home. He married a kind and loving woman who appreciated him for who he was. Together, they created a life filled with joy and contentment. Kiki, on the other hand, remained trapped in her unhappy marriage, filled with regret and longing for the love she had lost. She often thought of James and the life they could have had together. Her heart ached for the happiness she had sacrificed in favor of her family's wishes. Days turned into months, and months into years, but the pain in Kiki's heart never lessened. Each day was a reminder of the love she had forsaken. Her husband, though wealthy, was a cruel man who saw Kiki more as a possession than a partner. He was controlling and abusive, and Kiki lived in constant fear of his anger. The luxurious house she lived in felt more like a gilded cage, trapping her in a life of misery. One evening, after yet another violent outburst from her husband, Kiki found herself sitting alone in her room, tears streaming down her face. She clutched a small, worn photograph of her and James, taken on a sunny day when they were both young and full of hope. The memory of that day, of James's laughter and the warmth of his embrace, was a bittersweet comfort. As she stared at the photograph, Kiki's thoughts drifted to what might have been. She imagined a life where she had married James, where they had built a home together, filled with love and laughter. She pictured children with his kind eyes and gentle smile, and a life of simplicity but profound happiness. The ache in her heart grew stronger with each passing thought. Kiki's regret was a heavy burden. She wished she could turn back time and choose differently. She wished she had been brave enough to stand up to her family and fight for her love. But now it was too late. She was bound by her marriage, and the love of her life was lost to her forever. One day, as Kiki was walking through the market, she overheard a conversation that stopped her in her tracks. Two women were talking about James. "Did you hear? James just had his second child. They say he's the happiest man alive," one woman said. Kiki's heart skipped a beat. James was a father now, with a family of his own. The news brought a mix of emotions, happiness for James, but also a deep, painful longing for what could have been. She couldn't help but smile at the thought of James finding joy and fulfillment, even though it was a life that no longer included her. As the years continued to pass, Kiki's life remained a constant struggle. Her husband's abuse never ceased, and the emotional scars deepened. Yet, through all the pain, she held on to the memories of James. They were her refuge, a place she could escape to when reality became too harsh. One stormy night, after an especially brutal argument, Kiki made a decision. She packed a small bag with a few belongings, and, with the photograph of her and James clutched tightly in her hand, she left her husband's house. She had no plan, no destination in mind, but she knew she couldn't stay in the place that had caused her so much pain. Kiki wandered the streets, her mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. She knew she had to find a way to rebuild her life, to find some semblance of happiness. She decided to return to the village where she and James had grown up, hoping that familiar surroundings might offer some comfort. When she arrived, the village had changed, but the memories came flooding back. She walked past the spots where she and James had spent so much time together. The old oak tree where they had carved their initials, the small stream where they had often sat and talked for hours. Each place brought a mix of joy and sorrow. One day, as she was walking through the village market, she saw a familiar face, James. He was standing with his wife and their two young children, a look of pure contentment on his face. Kiki's heart ached at the sight, but she also felt a sense of peace. James had found the happiness he deserved. James noticed Kiki and walked over to her, his eyes filled with surprise and concern. "Kiki, is that you?" he asked softly. Kiki nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "It's me, James." They talked for a while, catching up on the years that had passed. Kiki shared her story, and James listened with a heavy heart. "I'm so sorry, Kiki," he said, his voice filled with genuine compassion. "You deserve so much better." Kiki smiled through her tears. "Thank you, James. I'm just glad to see you're happy." As they parted ways, Kiki felt a strange sense of closure. She knew she had made mistakes, but she also knew she had the strength to start anew. With James's kindness and the memories of their love to guide her, she began to rebuild her life, determined to find happiness on her own terms. The story of Kiki and James is a poignant reminder of the power of love, the pain of regret, and the resilience of the human spirit. It teaches us that while we cannot change the past, we can learn from it and find the strength to forge a new path. It also reminds us that true happiness comes from within, and that sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most profound personal growth.